The infection acquired in health facilities constitutes a global burden in various countries of the world and a great danger that affects the safety of patients, visitors, and healthcare providers. Environmental pollution plays a big role in transmitting the infection and its spread inside hospitals. Therefore, regular cleaning of surfaces, medical equipment, and equipment used directly with patients inside the patient isolation rooms is one of the basic and most important factors for controlling infection in health facilities. The final cleaning and disinfection of the isolation rooms for patients after their discharge is very important, as it contributes to providing a safe environment for the healthcare workers and patients inside these facilities and limiting the transmission of infection between patients or visitors inside the hospital. In order to reduce the risks of infection to which healthcare workers and health services may be exposed, and to ensure sound practices and raise the efficiency and skill of the workers, we recommend the implementation of all policies and procedures approved by the Ministry of Health necessary in the process of cleaning and disinfecting isolation rooms from infectious diseases step by step. And here is the beginning. The healthcare provider goes into the patient's room after the patient's discharge and starts the first step by disinfecting the hands with alcohol disinfectant according to the policy that he was previously trained on, focusing on cleaning and disinfection process after the patient is discharged. The healthcare provider begins by wearing the personal protective equipment assigned to him, by wearing the yellow gown correctly. Wearing a high-efficiency respiratory mask suitable for him according to the respiratory fit test, then wearing single-use gloves, and in the event that the health service provider must have a special equipment, which is an air helmet or hood, as highly efficient respiratory mask does not fit to the bearded people. Then the healthcare provider enters the room with his disinfectants and surface disinfectant wipes and starts removing all the existing wires and connections that connect the devices to the patient's bed, respectively. And he begins to remove the patient's belongings immediately, in order not to cause the dispersal of microbes in the atmosphere of the room and not to cause any scattering inside the room. He also removes all electrical wires, installations, and arranges them well for the vital signs monitor. Then he heads out, carrying the disinfected spaces available for the devices, and begins to empty the devices from the remnants of single-use supplies, equipment used in caring for the patient, and their disposal as medical waste. And he begins to conduct a thorough survey and disinfection of the environmental surfaces of the devices in the room, as all surfaces are cleaned and disinfected at the end of the procedure. Meanwhile, the healthcare provider cleans and disinfects all environmental surfaces in the room that are connected to the patient's care equipment and inspects all the patient's drawers to look for residues or disposable medical supplies. Remove all the patient leftovers and clean the patient's area thoroughly. Care should be taken to clear the screens of the vital signs monitor that's used with the patient in the correct way, so that every part of the screen is wiped and the drawers are wiped from the inside. And then move to the patient's bed. Then it is sprayed with the prepared spray and contains a cleaning and disinfection liquid for disinfection of the patient's bed. It's carefully sprayed in every part of it. This is to perform the wiping process of the bed with single-use dry pads, which are preferably made of non-woven material that is non-gauze or cotton, so as not to leave residues and traces on the surfaces of the patient's room, and the wiping is done accurately, so that each area is wiped without returning the towel to the area. Then the healthcare provider has finished his mission and removes his personal protective equipment, including the isolation apron. He went out of the room wearing a highly efficient respiratory mask to clean inside the entrance room of the patient. Then comes the role of the cleaning lady. To perform the routine cleaning before entering the room, start by hand rub with alcohol disinfectant according to MOH policy in preparation for entering the room. Then start wearing the personal protective equipment before entering the room. Wear the yellow isolation apron correctly. And then a highly efficient respiratory mask, fitting it after performing the fit test. Use single-use gloves to enter the patient's room to be cleaned and disinfected. The cleaning lady walks into the patient's room to slide the devices to the side to start cleaning the room from the inner area to the outside, so that the cleaning is from inside the room to the outside. Start by cleaning the upper first and lower area second, and get to the floor at the end. Noting that the cleaning is carried out accurately on all environmental surfaces from the ceiling, wall and floor to all areas of the environmental surfaces. Do not ignore any part of the isolation room, as it's important to disinfect all environmental surfaces completely and correctly, so that it does not become a source of infection for another patient. The floor is wiped with a special mop moistened with a well-cleaned and disinfected solution. And then replace gloves to return to the bed and equipment to its place. And clean the patient's dining table. And the area under the bed thoroughly with disinfectant solution, so that all surfaces have been thoroughly cleaned and disinfected. The cleaner focuses on frequently touched places such as door handles, light switches, etc. One of the frequently used places is the patient's isolation room because it's full of dust and microorganisms, and after the cleaner removes the personal protective equipment in the correct manner. Starting by removing the gloves and then the apron. Remove gown by rolling it inside correctly and avoid touching her clothes. Then she rubs her hands with an alcohol-based hand sanitizer before leaving the room and use a respirator or a mask. Dispose of medical waste and wash the hands with soap and water. Thus the cleaner's task is over, and remove the sign, "The isolation room is undergoing cleaning and disinfection operations." Then comes the role of the medical waste worker who collects medical waste and cleans the yellow waste containers them from inside and outside after wearing the protective clothing. He does not need to wear a highly efficient respiratory mask and is wearing a medical isolation gown and a single-use gloves and the surgical mask. wipes, cleans and disinfects the medical waste container properly in the entrance room or outside the isolation room. Then he collects the medical waste bags and ties them correctly by the tiers and putting labels indicating the room number and the section in which the patient is located, and closes them properly with the strap that cannot be reopened, and carries them away from his body and takes them out to be placed in the large container to collect waste from the medical departments. Then he removes the personal protective equipment, starting with the disposable gloves properly. Then he rubs his hands with the alcohol disinfectant, removes the apron and the mask, begins to collect his supplies, and goes away from the isolation room. Then comes the role of the final disinfection of the isolation room by using ultraviolet disinfection devices or a hydrogen peroxide disinfection device. The health worker is prepared to enter the room by disinfecting her hands and then by pulling the ultraviolet disinfection device to the entrance to the isolation room so that he wipes the wheels of the device before entering it to prevent the spread of any infection. The health worker enters the room, connects and arranges its position inside the room so that the ultraviolet rays are exposed to all environmental surfaces from all directions in the room. Remove all covers so that everything is exposed to ultraviolet rays and thus can be disinfected. Followed by opening all drawers, cabinets and all hidden places inside the room to be disinfected. And starts the process of activating the device through her own tablet device, which makes the process of ultraviolet disinfection easy and comfortable for the healthcare worker and protection for her during disinfection. After adjusting the settings for the device, the healthcare worker comes out, tightly closing the door behind her. The device starts working according to the specified period of time through the special electronic scanning in the device. This technology works to disinfect the room by dismantling the DNA links inside the germs, as the towers have a 360-degree automatic rotation feature, which ensures that the room is completely disinfected. After the disinfection process is completed, the health worker enters the room directly and pulls the equipment out, announcing that the room is sanitized and ready for immediate use.